this morning on this day, which commemorates the 100-year anniversary of the Race Massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We couldn't let this day go by without acknowledging the day and talking about it with what I'm calling a candid conversation about race relations in Tulsa 100 years ago and its implications on where we are right now as we struggle with some of the same issues today. I have a wonderful array of people with us this morning. I feel like I'm Tiffany Cross right now on Cross Connection because I've got some of the best minds that I know here with us on today. One of them, the first one I will call is my cousin, my first cousin, my brother cousin, but he is the Dr. Obadike Kamau, and he is a noted historian, writer, artist, professor. Many people have crossed his path, and he is a wealth of knowledge, and I cannot wait to hear what he has to say on this subject. And then there's Marcus Holmes, who is the facilitator of Love and Stuff, but keeps us focused on our history and the things that are important about our history. And I could not have this conversation without him. I know he's fitting us into his day, and if he has to leave before we're finished, we understand that. But we just wanted to make sure he was here with us on today to have a different maybe perspective of the way he looks at things based on what his scope of knowledge in HR and his passion for life and his hope is. We wanted to share with him on this morning. And then our resident Tulsan, who is living in Tulsa, Oklahoma, has been there from Detroit originally, but has been in Tulsa more than one stint in his life. And so he has a very, very clear understanding on the culture of the community. And we really want to talk about that and how that it transfers over into other areas of the country and that whole history and how history manifests itself in current culture. So good morning, gentlemen. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. And I'm very, very happy to be here with my sister cousin. As you said, we are cousins and sisters. There's a spiritual connection from when we were children.
Yes.
And Dr. Cousin, I think I'm just here. She's given too much hyperbole to have me on the panel with someone as esteemed as you. So I'm
No.
Oh, okay, all right. But it's a pleasure to meet you too, Brother Hall.
Thank you, sir.
Both of you, brother.
All right. So let's get started. I think that for many people who may be watching, they've just kind of finally heard a little snippet of this on the news in recent days as it reaches the 100-year commemoration. But I know that the two of you, Dr. Kamau and I'm going to go on and call you Reverend Williams today because I need to make sure that I'm giving some context to your purpose, your reason for being here, and your being in that community and entrenched in it. Tell us, from your perspective, what you know about the history, because we've heard so many different things over the course of this last week. You know, you've got some people who are being really clear about the fact that the history has not been recorded well, that there are all of these things that have happened to people, that the trauma has been so great that they are really kind of silent. I heard yesterday something that really bothered me, that it's not even in the history book for city history. I mean, no one learns it. So let's talk about that. Reverend Williams, why don't you start since you're there, and then Dr. K, kind of chime in with him, please.
Okay, so let me do a backward step twice and then go back. This year, April, the Tulsa Public School District 1, for the first time, actually made the teaching of the Tulsa Race Massacre part of the curriculum for the district, and all schools, all grade level, were mandated to actually make that part of Oklahoma history, that part of Tulsa history, be in teachers' lessons plans for at least 2 weeks during the month of May. Of course, they were late with me because I had already planned way in the beginning of the year that all of May was going to be focused on the race massacre. Okay, and so that occurs immediately. In the midst of that, or at least just after that, the governor of Oklahoma signs a bill that restricts the teaching of critical race theory and limits the way discussions of race and other social issues will actually be taught in Oklahoma. But the Tulsa Public School District pushes back and releases a statement that the district would not be moved from the decision that it had made to continue with the teaching of the race massacre. Now back, interestingly, necessarily, Oklahoma as a state and Tulsa as a city is supposed to be a Black state and a Black town. Because in 1890, Edward McCabe comes from New York, a lawyer, a surveyor, multi-profession, multi-discipline brother, comes from New York to Oklahoma. And in 1906, he and a cadre of African-American lawyers and others go to Washington, D.C. to organize Oklahoma as a Black state. But they are met with resistance from the white community and the tribes, particularly 5 civilized tribes here in Oklahoma. So this is necessarily supposed to be a Black state. And there are ways in which, beyond that Oklahoma, more than any other state in the country, the development of African-American towns proliferated here in a way nowhere else. More than 50 towns and cities were organized and developed by African-American people, 13 of which actually still exist to this day. And just the way that African-Americans have been here and a part of what has happened in this state, in this city of Tulsa, there are ways in which the tragedy of suppressing the 100-year history, or at least at 80 years is the point that it began to get pressed. The Tulsa Race Massacre had been suppressed for 80 years. At that time, it began to get pressed in ways that are still ongoing. Became a part of the national reparations movement for African Americans. But let Dr. Kamal come in. Let me invite him to come in, whatever, to share with us at this point.
I went to work at Langston University in Langston, Oklahoma in 1988, and I went in as the curator of the Melvin B. Tolson Black Heritage Center. And I was immediately blown away by the history of Oklahoma, because Oklahoma was one of those places that over time Black people had not particularly wanted to be. My son was actually born in Oklahoma. But I went to Oklahoma, and one of the first things I did was read the history of Langston University. And that's when I became familiar with attorney Edwin P. McCabe. And at Langston University, the Scholars Program is actually named after McCabe. I can only, amen what you said about his efforts in turning Oklahoma into a Black state, into the pushback. Many people know about the land rush that occurred at the beginning of Oklahoma, and just kind of like this amen in points you made. Langston is an 1890s institution. That's when the Morrill Act was passed, the second Morrill Act that began to allow Black institutions to be agricultural and mechanical institutions, A&M school. Langston is an 1890s institution. The land rush, and it's so funny because everybody calls them Oklahoma Sooners. But their Sooners came from people jumping claims sooner than they were allowed to.
That's right.
So it is another example of America romanticizing gangsterism. So I found out about McCabe. I found out about the effort to make Langston an all-Black state. I'm just kind of like sitting on this and what it means and how nobody knew about this. And I had the opportunity to run into Nathan and Julia Hare, who are both Oklahoma natives. And of course, in the 70s and the 80s, they were very prolific and public Black scholars. They were married, they worked as a group. She was from Tulsa. He was from a little town in Oklahoma named Slick, Oklahoma. That I'm not sure is even still there.
It's here. It still exists.
Okay, all right. The 50 Black towns that have been reduced to 13 because of the economic infrastructure necessary to allow towns to continue to exist was basically not allowed to be put in. Perhaps the two most dynamic Black towns that still exist are Langston, of course, because of the university, which is a very viable, strong institution, and Bowling, and tell me if I'm wrong, but they have an annual rodeo in Bowling, a Black rodeo.
That's right.
People still come to from all across the country.
That's right.
So there were, and so there's still 11 others. But I was like, okay, Oklahoma was supposed to have been a Black state. I'm still like tripping on that. And Nathan and Julia come, and they come to Julia's brother-in-law was Ernest Holloway, who at one point was the longest serving president of the university in the country. He was president of Langston for almost 40 years.
Yeah.
And Julia and Dr. Holloway were brother and sister-in-law. He was married to her sister. Her sister passed. I never met her sister, but they still maintained a relationship. And when they were back in the state, they often came through. And they would just kind of habitually walk down to the Black Heritage Center. So when they walked down there this time, they met me. I was, of course, very familiar with them. I was talking about their work with them, which I had read. I had actually had on as guest for a talk show I used to do in Houston, and they remembered that. And of course, I guess their most famous work was the BMW, Black Man Working People, that they did. But they asked me, they told me that they wanted to do something about what happened in Tulsa in 1921. And, you know, they were talking about it, and I was like, finally, look, what happened in Tulsa in 1921? And when they told me, to some degree, it was difficult to accept because you really, as somebody who's reading history and running stuff down, finding out how, you know, the attempt to literally scrub this event out of the history. There are no accounts of it in any of the Tulsa papers, any of the state papers of Oklahoma, the White Daily. There are no accounts of it. They removed them. The Eagle, the Black paper in Tulsa, it was removed from that paper. So you can't find editions where this is talked about. the survivors were, of course, afraid to mention it. And it was brought up by, I believe he's passed. His name was Don Ross. Used to be a state representative.
That's
I believe
exactly right.
the sister in his position now is named Goodwin. And Don Ross was a student at Booker T. Washington High, and his grandmother told him about it.
Yeah.
When he was in high school, and he didn't believe her.
Let me put a pin in that right quick. Yesterday, last night, and it's on YouTube, and I've shared it on my page, and I hope that you will watch. Tremaine Lee does a really good expert reporting of talking to people. Often when we hear stories, oral tradition has always got a little yeast in it. We know that. But some of the things that are happening right now with the excavation of graves from graves that people were just thrown in, and that's not a new phenomenon for tragedy and travesty that happens to African Americans in communities. If you think back on things like hurricanes and things that happened, it was just a dump grave. They were not allowed to have, any real burial, but they just located. And this mayor, no matter what it's costing him politically, is at least taking a couple of steps. I don't know where his heart is. That's not what I know, but I'm seeing what has been done. And for those who did not want to take the chance to excavate, to go in and to pull up some of those graves, he is doing so. I'm sure it's a push. I'm sure that all of the attention that's been placed on Tulsa is making a difference in that. But I want to get Marcus in here because I know his time is short. Marcus, what had you heard, and how do you feel? And that's why I asked you to come, because they were knowledgeable of Tulsa. I wanted to talk to someone who was not so knowledgeable about it, and how it feels for you the more you keep hearing about this history that's been literally buried.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. I have heard, Valencia, you will know that from the Wolverine State Baptist Convention, There were two ladies who did closing remarks for their annual addresses every year. One of them is Rosa Fowler, who was the director of Young People, and the other is Willie Mae Murkison, who was the president of the auxiliary over the young people and women as well. And they would reference this Negro Wall Street.
Yes.
And so I must have been 9 years old. That was in the 70s. I'm a 70s baby. And then probably in the 80s, again, I heard the Tulsa Massacre. I had heard of it being a riot, and being a 70s baby, I wouldn't have a context for riots, right? 67 would have been the Detroit riot. So I wouldn't have a personal context, even though during that time, my parents lived on Dexter Avenue. So they were in the throes of that riot, but I didn't have a personal context for that, right? And then I think it's Richard Delgado that says, and I'll read, as marginalized people, we should strive to increase our power, cohesiveness, and representation in all significant areas of society. We should do this, though, because we are entitled to these things and because fundamental fairness requires this allocation of power. So when I hear these learned gentlemen talk about Edward McCabe, that comes to mind to me, that there was this thought that because we had an entitlement that we should be a Black state or Black cities. And so that I find to be very fascinating. Also, with these tribes, we are tribal people, we are communal people. And so here we are enslaved with Chickasaws and Choctaws and Muskegee and Seminoles. We're enslaved there. So we're getting the tribal reinstatement, but then we're given land. And then some are serving in the war. So there is this entitlement that's brewing. Hey, wait, I'm equal to you. I should be able to own land and create and procreate societies and communities. So that's kind of the orientation. I wish that we had the mentality of building our own Black Wall Streets right today, and had that in this young nation that I think the United States of America has the imposter syndrome. It's a young nation and it doesn't really know who it is.
Yep.
But how wonderful that there was a sect of our people who knew who they were and stood up and built a resistance around that. So I find all of this very fascinating. I think it is important. It's speaking to us even in this day
Yes.
of where we are and who we are relative to how do we go about, what does the resistance look like today? I just want to mention one last thing, riot, massacre, pogrom, I've heard that word. And I'm wondering, was this really an ethnic cleansing of sorts? Get rid of all of the Black people. They were doing fine on that side of the tracks, right? But the moment that you want more than that side of the tracks, we need to cleanse people, and we need to cleanse that it ever existed. That to me is the part. Cleanse it from history, not just cleanse Black people, not just kill Black people, not just get those uppity Negroes, get a gun and get a nigger. Get something that cleanses the history so that nobody will ever try to do this again.
Yep.
And so that, I think, is something that we have to contend with today, about our history being embedded in everything, so that in this young nation, that our people who are not a young nation, African Americans are not young nation, but
right.
we have to make sure that we embed that in the history of our people as we move forward. So I just wanted to share
that's really good, Marcus. You just said something I wanted to come back to, so that they will never do it again. And I think that there is something that is intrinsic in the undercurrent of entrepreneurship in America. I think that there's an undercurrent of, I got to keep it close to the cuff. I got to make sure that nobody knows how well I'm doing, because they will come for me. And that proverbial they still exists.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that. What is it that is the reverberation that has stayed with us? I know you can talk about how it stayed in Tulsa, Darren, because we've spoken about that briefly. The reverberation of, we can't let them do this to us again. So we have to do what? What is it that has been the reverberation of the actions of the 21 massacre?
Let me say this to Marcus. He enunciates riot, massacre, even pogrom, and let's not miss Holocaust.
Yep.
The Tulsa Race Massacre is also a Holocaust.
Yes, it was.
And any wise student of history would ask, when someone says the Holocaust, you have to ask which one. Because there are multiple. There are multiple in America. And so, to your question, let me take these other couple of steps, because the rationale for white Oklahoma, white Tulsa, to never have another Greenwood again comes from, again, the history. So you have McCabe, who comes in 1890. African Americans come in 4 waves to Oklahoma. There are those who actually come because when McCabe gets here, he's putting out the call to African American communities across the country. Come to Oklahoma. It's an Indian territory. It's an unsettled place. This is somewhere that we can actually get a start and do things. But prior to that, understand this. African Americans necessarily never just wanted to have our own thing by ourselves with ourselves. We wanted to have our things wherever we were. It was white supremacy and segregation that forced us to have to go to ourselves and to have our things by ourselves. By nature, we are a people. We're a family. That you already said it, Brother Marcus. And we are a communal people. We're a tribal people. And not tribal necessarily because we exclude, but we want to be and have wherever we are. The segregation forces us to Oklahoma because it is so rife across the country. And so McCabe is putting out the call. Others are coming. Most histories start with African Americans coming with the Trail of Tears, with the Indian Removal Act, coming from the Southeast with the 5 tribes this way. And that is true, but that's the 3rd wave of African Americans coming to Oklahoma. The 4th wave is after the Trail of Tears, when the land rush is called for in the late 1890s,
Yeah.
1896, 1899.
Yeah.
At this time, we have O.W. Gurley, who comes from Arkansas. We have J.B. Stratford, who comes from Kentucky. We have A.J. Smitherman, who comes from Missouri. These four brothers become the pillars of the building of what is Greenwood. They become, listen to this, millionaires because of the economic viability of Greenwood. The dollar on Greenwood, just the street alone between Pine and Archer, turns over 12 times before it ever leaves this community.
Wow.
That is how economic viability gets to become this place. Booker T. Washington comes to Tulsa several times. He'd come and saw what was happening in Greenwood, happening in other places too, but he saw it happening in here in a way that he gives it the moniker, the Negro Wall Street. He sees what is happening there, and he invites other African Americans to come to this area also. This area is in negotiation to be doing business with countries around the world because of how successful it is. 40 by 40 blocks, all built by, and this is the distinction with other African-American successful communities across the country, all built by African-Americans, but they own every piece of land, every piece of real estate. Everything here was owned by the people that was in Greenwood. That wasn't true of Harlem. That wasn't true of the other African-American communities around the country. It is then now the oil boom that hits in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area. Yes, sir. Dr. Smile, go ahead. Speak to that.
No, I just wanted to say the reason, because what happened in Tulsa happened in Black communities to some degree throughout the South. It was largely based on the segregationist attitude of white supremacy. But the reason that Tulsa was richer than other Black communities was oil. And go ahead, my brother. I had that. It's so important, and people never talk about it. Even now that they are beginning to talk about it now, because there was a control of oil distribution where Greenwood was geographically, and because they owned that land, they were able to take advantage of the richness of oil. And what that did, that's why they were on the verge of becoming international.
Right. Right. And it's interesting that you said that, because I know pockets of East Texas that have these oil rights, and it has helped those communities, but because of that undergirding, those reverberations from what happened in Tulsa, nobody talked about it, but everybody knew.
Everybody knew about it.
Everybody knew it happened. And so it stopped some of these communities that could have begun to grow and do things with it. It made them just hold on to it and then pass it down to maybe some not as knowledgeable generations who did not do what could have been done. I think that's why I asked about the reverberation of and I don't want to call it fear. I want to call it resignation, because I feel like some people just got resigned to, I'm not going to press this. We're going to, we got this little bit over here. We're going to hold on to this, because if we try to build on it, Tulsa can happen to us. Greenwood can happen to us. Go on.
No, I was just going to say the beginnings of what happened in 1921 actually began in the Red Summer of 1919.
Exactly.
And another thing that we need to keep in mind is that after this period of time, because that's when brothers had begun returning from World War I. And that's when, one of the last, this was when the era of the white mobs were ended, because the white mobs would run up in there and brothers would have their guns and they were like, hey, we've been killing white folks in Europe, But that's an important place that you have come to. So after 1921, at some point, they stopped sending citizens into these communities because they met some serious resistance. And that's when the police and official representatives of the government began to come in and charge Black communities, if you will. In 1917 in Houston, there were Black soldiers. A policeman was, doing what white police do, and he did it to a brother. And, these brothers, we're not dealing with that. And so this stuff, the state is the only way racism could have continued. And that's why when you begin talking about reparations, you have to bring the state on all levels, federal, state, and local, on all levels, cities, counties, because when white citizens were no longer able to, and when they would run into to what had initially been fear, and now it was fierce resistance, they were not necessarily ready to continue to sacrifice themselves. And that's when the police and soldiers, the bombing of Tulsa, and this is amazing. I'm gonna get Brother Williams to go back to it. That was done by the National Guard, the Oklahoma National Guard. This was a complete white societal pogrom. This is like the young brother where it supposedly started, and a lot of this was just player hate. North Tulsa was rich. North Tulsa was, the book I helped Nathan and Julia write was called Fire on Mount Zion. Mount Zion was a church in Tulsa that was the finest church in the city.
Give me that name again.
Black church.
Mount Zion.
The name of the book. The name of the book.
Fire on Mount Zion, but it's out of print. And
okay, I just want to put it there.
Yeah. But next time I go to Langston, I'm going to see if I can get a copy and get them to reprint it.
Yes.
Now is the time for it. And the sister who I interviewed, and I've been sitting here trying to think of her name this whole time, she was older than Mother Fletcher, or at least around the same age. And she was a cosmetologist. And she, I was trying, anyway, but I conducted a series of interviews, and those interviews should also be in the Melvin B. Tulsa Black Heritage Center for Nathan and Julia's book, The Fire on Mount Zion.
We need to take a trip.
Yeah.
We need to take a trip. We really do. Too close to not do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Let's shift to reparations for a moment, because
Dr. V, just before you, two things very quickly before you do. Contextualize what Dr. Kamal says. Yes, Tulsa Race Massacre is not an anomaly.
Right.
Watch the progressive step, and I'm just making one step. He mentions 1917, but literally since the end of Civil War and passing of Emancipation Proclamation, you have these types of things happening to African American communities and settlement. But 1919, the Red Summer, titled by James Weldon Johnson, the Red Summer, because of all the blood that had been spilled in the streets in some 3 dozen African American towns across the country,
including Longview, Texas.
Longview, Texas is one. St. Louis is one. Omaha, Nebraska is another. Chicago is another.
Knoxville,
3
Tennessee.
dozen towns across the country. That's 1919. 1920, you have the Ocoee Massacre, which is in the Orlando, Florida area, which is an exact same kind of situation. Reason for starting is different, Usually it's the case of an African-American man and some alleged misappropriation with a white girl. Little different in this town. A white man said that he was threatened by a black man in Ocoee, Florida. But that's 1920, and there was a couple other 1920, and then 1921. So Tulsa Race Massacre is not an anomaly. It's an American normality. If we understand and see it in the right way. But here is to the question you asked me previously that I didn't get to, very short response to it. Why is there this determined attempt for African Americans not to rise and have these things again? Because I told you 1906 is when McKay goes and the other lawyers tried to get Oklahoma organized as a black state. 1907 is when statehood is granted. Do you know what the first two bills that are passed by the legislature in Oklahoma? Both of them, Senate Bill 1, Senate Bill 2, are segregation bills. And so from the inception of the state, there is the understanding that we're not going to let them do anything here that we've seen them doing across the country. And when Tulsa and Greenwood does happen, it flies in the face of, it goes against everything that was designed to prevent it from happening. And you know, white people are hard-headed. And when they see it don't go their way, they're not going to stop to make sure they stop whatever it is. And Dr. Kamal said something, and I'm finished in terms of this response, that's why I'm always careful. I don't just say the Tulsa Race Massacre. I'm always saying the state of Oklahoma and the city of Tulsa, because it's a multi-concerted effort in order to limit the movement and especially the rise of African-American people. And reparations actually, yes, is the next piece that comes logically in the question. Yes.
The reason I said that, and I'm bringing it up, is this. There are few clear situations where there should be no question about reparations. I mean, there's some other areas where somebody can say, well, we don't know exactly how that went down, and we can, they can, we know they're wrong either way. But this is a clear situation. This has so much clarity for reparations. I've never seen so much clarity. Because you still have the descendants, because it's such a tight-knit community, so to speak. All of your descendants on either side are still in the community. You don't have to go far. That's why they can do these documentaries they're doing right now, and could have always done it. I am so excited that the few survivors that are still alive were able to go to Capitol Hill and put this on the real books. On the books of not just a conversation or not just a documentary, but on the books, on the congressional record that this happened. And so talk to us about, Dr. K, I know where you are about reparations. So we're good with that. So come on, y'all, let's talk reparations. Let's talk about what it means to have some reparations for this Holocaust when we see that there are reparations for Holocaust for other people. But yet,
Teaching in Langston is when I became familiar with the reparations movement. And in Langston University is when I wrote, I Want My Money. And of course, money is only a part of reparations, but I figured that would be the hook that would get people interested in it. I Want My Money, I did a spoken word CD, and I had the pleasure of having my cousin provide vocals on it. And I Want My Money, it came out in 2002. And it's time, I think, for me to really start pushing. We're
working on that. Keep going.
Okay. So B was on the CD, and so I Want My Money was a piece that I wrote because rap and hip hop and you had the young brothers kind of getting into the gangster hip hop at Langston, and I was working with these young brothers, and they knew I was a poet. And so I said, I'm going to write a song for y'all. I'm going to write something for you all to do. And I Want My Money is what came out of that. I never did I Want My Money publicly till I got to Philadelphia. I always looked at it as a song that I had written for somebody else. It's kind of amazing, huh?
Wow.
But I want reparations. The root word of it is repair. And reparations is usually a word that's spoken of on a huge scale. Now they use it pretty loosely, and if somebody breaks in your house and gets caught, they're supposed to provide reparations. And if you want to use it there, that's fine. But reparations usually occurs on state and national levels, and it's a problem. It's a Holocaust. It affects at least thousands of people. There is not only debt that's involved, but there is usually a robbery. The people who are harmed, who are victimized, generally lose. Their lives are no longer the same. And so once you go through the war, the political upheaval, etc., reparations is an attempt to make that people whole. But of course, we know that that can only go so far. There are people who will never be made whole on an individual level, regardless of what happened, because a crime was committed. Reparations come about largely because of national crime. And there are some cases under Ronald Reagan, of all people, Japanese Americans were provided reparations because they were interned during World War II. And they were people of color. They didn't intern German Americans. They interned Japanese Americans. And under Reagan, they were provided reparations. They think making Juneteenth a national holiday is reparations for us.
Wow.
But it ain't. We not going for that. And I am so, I feel so good, B, that the thing that we've been talking about, and reparations is something that our people have been talking about since 1868.
Yep.
At the end of the Civil War, we were working on reparations right back then. William Sherman, War is Hell Sherman, pulled a group of black ministers together in Savannah, Georgia, toward the end of the Civil War and asked them what they wanted. And that's where the whole concept of 40 acres, $50, which has gotten removed, and a mule came from. And to speak to something that Darren said then, when Granger asked them, did they want to be a part of the larger community or did they want to be by themselves? They told them basically the same thing Darren told them, white folk are crazy. And we want to take our stuff and be over here with our own. And another thing that you said that's so important, people are always saying, this is not who we are. Yes, it is who you are. And if history was taught correctly, people wouldn't even be saying this is not who we are. People would be saying we need to change who we have been because this is who you are. Thank goodness to some degree, it's not as violent, overwhelmingly violent. How did they say it? From Jim Crow to James Crow Esquire. Anybody who plays dominoes knows about getting pencil whipped. So I'm going to go ahead. I just wanted to amen what Darren was saying. I wanted to start the conversation on reparations.
Let me hear from Marcus before he leaves, because I know he has an appointment. So can you chime in here for a moment? And
absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. Like I said, I know these historians are going at it, but I did want to just jump back. Before I had ever heard Dick Rowland's name, I heard Eugene Williams in Chicago, who swam across that boundary and was hit with the stone and drowned in that red summer of 1919. So I just had to say that. But to me, reparations from a layman's term is, I read somewhere that it was $1.8 million worth of claims that were made at that time. So the valuation of what those claims were for property should be, today's dollars, should be granted to the descendants. I heard that there were 6,000 people at least that were interned, that were put in these concentration type camps. So there should be dollars assessed for that in today's value to their descendants as well. And the economic disinvestment that had, the opportunity cost where they stop investing in that area, the value of that today should be included in the conversations for reparations. Because, I read somewhere, I think it was one attorney said, J.W. Hughes said, I'm going to hold on to what I have until I get what I'm supposed to get. Well, they had nothing left to hold on to. And so what's the value of, we can't even really enumerate what the value of the psychological damage, but we can say where you decided to put in freeways and where you decided to do other things with that property, the opportunity cost of that should be annualized, or it should be put in today's dollars value and dispersed accordingly. So those would have to be parts of the conversation. To me, we can't even really have that discussion. And I just wanted to drop in there, I know time is fleeting, that this celebration that was canceled, now they're saying it was canceled because of the survivors wanting more money. I don't know if that's true, but they should want all the money that they can get. So I think we have to have a real conversation. And I think, to me, at the fulcrum of it is truth telling. Are we really ready to tell the truth about what's here?
And
because
that's the answer.
Then you'll put money where your mouth is. But if you're not willing to tell the truth, then reparations crumbles without that part of the conversation, in my meager opinion.
You are exactly correct, Marcus. I thank you for your candor in this discussion. I don't think we're done with this discussion. I think today is just the beginning of starting to talk about some very important things that have kind of been, we kind of talk them up in Black history and they kind of go under. And then but I think that one of the things that we must do, and I know you have a forum, I don't have any problem using my forum. We've got to make sure that this is as much of a conversation that we have, just like we talk about relationships, just like we talk about other things, because our love for ourselves has to include our history, because we cannot build on what we do not deal with. The deconstruction that is necessary in this country, in this adolescent, look at yourself only country, because it's an adolescent. It has all the markings of adolescent with some abnormality to it. But anyway, the point is that we've got to face it. We've got to press it. As my mama said, they didn't send us to school to eat our lunch. We went to school for a purpose. So now we've got to use all of this brain power, all of this exposure, all of these things that we know to come together and blow these things out the water. We can't just depend on folks who are fighting congressional issues. Because at the end of the day, they go to dinner together. We know that. So my point is, if grassroots is the key, and we've got to recognize it, and we've got to deal with it. And unfortunately, we can't even depend on our churches anymore. I know that there are some church representatives on this line, but we cannot depend on the church united, because the desire to be bigger than you ought to be is more important than taking care of your people. But that's a whole nother workshop. Marcus, go to your appointment. Thank you so much. Thank you. I just want to say this. For me, this is about a relationship, our relationship with America. And when a relationship isn't working, you start resisting and you start killing each other if you're not telling the truth. Right. And then worse happens. So thank you for having me. You're exactly right.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Marcus, and to be here with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Marcus.
Appreciate you, Doc, as always.
Two of you. Marcus, thank you. And I didn't mean to go on that rant, but that's my passion about this thing. And and I am very concerned that the institutions within us that used to be our stay are now as suspect as those that we are trying to resist against. And so my question to each of you is, as we talk about this, and as I said, we there's a whole lot more to talk about, but as we look at this history, as we look at it now being peeled open like an onion, and it's going to get worse, because the more that things get talked about, like the Red Summer that people don't remember, and now they go look at it again and start to unpeel this onion, the anger that is going to ensue for all of these years of mistreatment, of hate personified, of all of those things that we are coming to understand, and a generation who is like, try Jesus, not me, that they, as they get to recognize what could have been, as this entrepreneurial spirit that lives within them is fighting to get out, and they recognize what could have been. Oh, you talk about a reparations movement, that you're going to always have some mess in the game. You're always going to have some people who just want, the frivolous things of life. But that wealth, when we look at the GNP for African Americans, and we're at minus money. So I don't care how many figures you make, we're at minus as a community. How do we move past that without it? And I'm not knocking anybody who's into this, but without the volatility of cryptocurrency and all of those hurry up and get some money, and it's just volatile all over the place. What do we do with the implications of what happened to Tulsa and what is happening right now?
Can I jump in real quick?
Yes.
Because I think we need to understand how we got here.
Yeah.
We are very hard on ourselves, and I'm not saying that we don't need to make some moves. I just think that we need to understand how we got here.
Yeah.
We need to understand that there is nothing wrong with us, that we are normal people that want to do well as individuals and as a collective. The thing that I really appreciated about Edwin P. McCabe as I grow older, and also there was a gentleman named Benjamin Pap Singleton who tried to do the same thing in Kansas, who tried to make Kansas a black state, was that there is something that comes with state power that allows you to bring everything together and provide the protection to the people who are a part of your group. We were, the people who are called African Americans now, were without statehood, without citizenship, without a place to necessarily call their own spiritually from 1619 to 1868, when they passed the 14th Amendment. We were out there by ourselves. The only thing that we had was God. I used to deal, when I taught in Denver, I ran into a Civil War expert in the history department who got angry with me because I was teaching that our people, caused the Civil War spiritually. What we did was we asked God to get us out of this.
Yep.
We didn't know how. It couldn't have been a natural disaster. It wouldn't have been weather. It had to be a social chaos and determined. It had to be a war. And we asked God to get us out of this, however you need to do it.
1619 to what? What is the date you give?
1868.
That's
That's
the
year of the 14th Amendment. And that's when we were granted citizenship from the top down without being involved in the conversation about what citizenship even made. So even when they call themselves doing things for us, they have done it in such a paternalistic and harmful way. And we were not even granted the right. Sherman asked us what we wanted to do. Nobody else asked us what we wanted to do. We may not have wanted to be involved in America. We didn't have the opportunity. We may have said, look, give us this land and we'll become our own state. Our being attached to white America has largely been a disadvantage. Politically, certainly economically, and certainly socially. And we need to begin to understand the reason that we seem to be so individualistic is because for the Sterling Brown, they said they come in 10, they come in hundreds. When they see us, when you look at the police and see 9 policemen on one brother, these are things that are not new. They are patterns that have been carried over into where we are, contemporarily. Let me shut up because I'm ranting.
No. That you all are here for this reason, because there is such a wealth of knowledge in both of you, and that's and Marcus as well, who focuses his a little differently, because he is an HR person, so he is trying to find. When you think of the human resources that we are and the things that have happened to us, he's looking at it from a human resource perspective. But here are these two history, politically savvy, but very, very African-American entrenched, learned brothers that I really wanted you all to come and kind of, as you have been doing, kind of tag teaming on each other, because I think that what has happened is that these voices are not heard.
That's right.
Are not heard. And people need to know that everything's not new. This wokeness that some people are touting today, your wokeness is late. There's some folk been woke a long time. And I think we have to continue to put this in the forefront. Anyone who is watching, anyone who watches later, share, send this to people have conversations around what this conversation is talking about, and let's begin to build an online think tank. We've tried to do it one-on-one. Then what happens is COVID comes, and even our meetings get shut down. It's time to take the gloves off and say, we're going to have some online think tanks, and whoever gets to hear it, you get to hear it, because we've been silent and quiet too long. And trust me, there are think tanks going around right now of white supremacy. They don't care. They don't care who knows that they're doing it. And so we've got to meet boldness with boldness. And I'm not talking about violence. So anybody who says that I'm saying that, you're lying, the truth is not in you. I'm talking about some candid, fruitful conversation, so that we can, as a people, as a group of people, both the younger and the middle and the older, come together and have a clear understanding of what has happened, so that we can then begin to build on what can happen.
And I'm going to, real quickly, I'm going to tell you something else. First of all, it's laughable that they call themselves trying to stop the teaching of Black history. Because this is something that they've done very well for centuries. But that level of desperation is so high that now they can't even hide it. We can't talk about critical race theory. One of the things that's kind of amazing to me is they create this boogeyman, these boogeymen for white people, and critical race theory has become a boogeyman.
Yep.
They can't even tell you what it is. The people that they are talking to, the people who are using it, the people who say let's not teach it, don't even know what it is. They don't have a definition for it. But we need to deal on a more in-depth level.
Absolutely.
Than they do. But they are running scared. I'm sorry. It looks like it's being strong, but they running scared.
Oh,
and
that's
this
the truth.
history is coming out, and it's
That's
like when your old man is about to get caught. He starts doing a lot of different things to try to prevent that from happening. But that's what's going on.
And it's happening across the board, whether it's the voter suppression, whether it's all of these, this smoke screen of make you focus on this while we're doing all of this underneath. The game that has been played for centuries, we are hip to the game, which is what they don't understand, which is why, as I said on yesterday, you can try all you want to. The jig is up. We know how you play. We know how you work. We know what you do. And we're not moved by it. We are not going, they were not depending on, if they could have stopped the mindset of a Stacey Abrams, they would have. But it's out here now. We know what can happen. So you've allowed us to see what can happen. So now, and with people who are learned, we are not just, we're grassroots, but we're also, doctors and lawyers and Indian chiefs, as they say. We're there. So as we move forward, we cannot go back to that place where we just, try to go back to normal. As I think about us coming out of this pandemic, if we don't come out of this pandemic ready, shame on us. We have had 15 months to get our heads together and get our act together. I don't intend to go back to what was. There's no going back to it. We've seen too much. We felt too much. We've gone through too much. We must go forward to what is. And I'm grateful to the two of you for your consistency. Dr. K, you've been consistent since you taught me about Tulsa when you were in Langston. Okay. And so I know that there are minds, and I know that sometimes it's a scary place to be, but I think that the place for those people who are the rebels, the radical ones in our culture, the ones who are willing to be the warriors, has to be in these forums. We've got to make sure that we're out here, and we cannot think that the people are coming to us. We got to go to them. The church found that out. So now it's time for us to find out that we have to come to the people to discuss the things that are absolutely important for our people, and to get rid of and to diffuse all the conspiracy theories, because you're always going to have somebody who look like us who's going to be working for somebody else. You all know exactly what I'm saying. So truth has to be on the forefront. And so I am grateful to both of you today. We are not done with this discussion. I would like to see us have the discussion again. I just wanted to mark this 100-year commemoration as the with the reverberation that we're not done, that it's 100 years since this, but every large Black community in America has had something similar happen to it, South and North, because urban renewal, as they call it, but urban removal is what it really was, happened everywhere. I want to leave you with this thing that Bobby Easton Sr. said on the documentary, and it really resonated with me. He said, "I don't choose to be uncomfortable, but reality has made me uncomfortable." And we don't choose to come at this thing like this, but reality has made us have to do it. And so if we're going to leave, as I see, a legacy for young people to say that they do not have to accept what the status quo gives them, if we're going to be able to shift their minds away from the numbing of their minds from celebrityism and materialism and all of those things, we're going to have to be out here spitting truth in a way that they can hear it, ingest it, and begin to use the greatness that they have. These are some of the smartest young people, creative young people the world has ever seen. You got one, Dr. K, and they're smart, but their galvanizing is what the greatest fear is. I say we make those fears reality. And we help them to galvanize themselves to be the best that they can be for not only themselves, but for our people. I thank you. Thank you, Reverend Darren Williams, Tulsa resident, Dr. Obadike Kamau, the resident guru of our family and the sage of our generation. And we thank you for your being here with us on today. I know this is taking the encouraged in a whole nother direction, but I believe that there's a reason for it, that I can be encouraging on Tuesday and informative any other day of the week and still be an encouragement to those of you who need it. Thank you to those of you who are here. Thank you, Veronica, for saying very informative. And those who have been here today, please share, please share, please share, and share again. And when it gets low on your timeline, share it again. Because that's the only way that we're going to get the information out. May God bless you. And thank you. And we will talk soon.
Peace.
All right. Bless you. Thank you for the platform.